Welcome to MANstream Media. We have with us tonight, as always, Warren Farrell, the good Dr. Warren Farrell. Hello, Warren.
Hi, how are you, Paul? And Tom.
We got Paul Elam also. Paul, you there?
Hi, Tom. How you doing?
I'm doing good. We're having a special edition of MANstream Media tonight. Our hope is to have spontaneous broadcasts when an issue surfaces that's of importance to men's issues. That's happened this week with an article in Time magazine by Caroline Kitchens titled, "It's Time to End Rape Culture Hysteria." Warren, can you start us off with that?
Yeah, first I want to say that I'm very cognizant of having been on the board of NOW of New York City that women have to be a part of this discussion. And in fact, that's exactly what is needed, a discussion between men and women. But what has happened is that there are basically four parts of gender. There's liberal women, there's conservative women, there's conservative men, and there's liberal men. And all of gender has been dominated by one aspect of gender, which is liberal feminist women. And so the whole purpose of MANstream Media is to say there are conservative and liberal men who have perspectives on issues to deal that have to do with male-female relationships. And none is more potent and more difficult to touch than the issue of rape, and we sort of mustered the courage here tonight to talk about it from a MANstream perspective, recognizing that the men are only part of the stream that feed into an ocean of a larger discussion. We want the whole ocean, but with the MANstream dried up, we have to recover that stream and feed that into the ocean.
Indeed, and I think the man side of things has been quiet for too long, and that's kind of what we're here about. So I hope tonight we can kind of voice that side of things and know that, yes, we're three men, and so be it. That's okay.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So what about this time to end rape culture hysteria?
Paul?
Well, it is. If I may repeat the title of the program, it is time to end rape culture hysteria. And this is, as Warren alluded to, it's an extremely complicated, polarizing, emotional topic for most anybody, particularly those that have been affected by rape in one way or another, or been affected by accusations of rape, the families of those people. This drives people to quick emotional decisions, and the problem has been the narrative for at least the last 25 to 30 years has been that there's only going to be one discussion about rape, and that is men can stop rape and men need to stop raping women, and that has morphed into the idea of a rape culture, with the proponents of which assert that we actually live in a culture that condones and normalizes the sexual assault of women by men. That's the assertion, and that has led to the assumption that all men are potential rapists. Susan Brown Miller once said that rape is the tool by which all men control all women with fear, something almost exactly in those words. And so what we've ended up with is a divided culture of rapists and rape victims, interpreted by proponents of rape culture. Any talk of protecting yourself from potentially being raped is deemed as victim blaming. We have removed due process for young men in colleges and universities, not allowed them to adequately defend themselves against allegations of sexual assault, and this is by order of the presidential administration. This came down from the Dear Colleague letter, which is a part of this. The problem, though, is that outside perhaps the prison population, where it truly is a rape culture, where rape is a normalized process and people are victimized and authorities look the other way and quietly condone what's happening. In the culture at large, though, there is no evidence at all, nothing to suggest. You ask the average person how they feel about rapists, and they loathe rapists, sometimes above murderers and above all other forms of crime. there's an extreme sense of animosity in this culture toward rapists. And when you combine that emotional intensity for a crime with disinformation about the frequency of the crime, about the degree to which people are being affected, and about the nature and the frequency of perpetrators, then you have a recipe for disaster socially. And that's what we've begun to see. I recall a young man, and this is just one example, a young man named Caleb Warner out of the University of North Dakota was kicked out of school because a tribunal found by preponderance of the evidence standards that he was guilty of sexually assaulting a classmate. Well, it turns out that the classmate also reported this to the police in the local area. They did an investigation and determined that she was filing a false report and issued a warrant for her arrest. She fled the state to avoid prosecution, and the school still would not back off of the conviction of him in that. He spent 2 years and untold amount of money trying to get back into school, and finally, after exhausting himself, the school relented and finally acknowledged his innocence. But by that time, his life had been turned upside down too much. He's now driving a truck in North Dakota doing deliveries with no plans on going back to school. That's one example of many, many. Even some of these young men are starting to sue the schools. But the fundamental problem is that in teaching people that the culture approves of rape, we're misleading them about the nature of the problem. And when you mislead people about the nature of a problem, the only thing you can possibly expect to come of that is for people to experience that problem more. In other words, the likelihood is more rapes that go unreported, more rapes that go uninvestigated, and more rapes that happen at all. So this is a huge problem, but fortunately part of the reason for this show is that there is indications out there right now that finally that rape culture idea, the concept of rape culture, is starting to get some serious academic and institutional questioning that's long overdue.
Yeah, very good, Paul. I think that's really good. Tom, do you have anything before I add something?
No, you go right ahead, Warren.
I think one of the things that, let's just take an example. Say you're a mom and a dad, and you have a son, and your son is, asked a woman out, and he's going to college, and he hears the message from feminists, which the main feminist mantra around this issue is, what is there about no that you don't understand? So he's out with a woman, and the two of them are kissing, and the tongue is going in and working a little bit, and the woman pulls back, and he realizes, being an intelligent guy, that because she pulled back her tongue and withdrew her lips, that was in essence a no. And so then he starts to say to himself, well, what is there about no you don't understand? Now let's see now, wait a minute. Does that mean no forever? Does that mean no until there's a new date that she says yes to? Does that mean no until maybe she's more relaxed? Should I maybe offer her some more wine? Or maybe I'm too nervous and should I get myself some more wine? Is the music too loud? Have I talked too much about myself and not enough about her? Have I talked too much about her and not enough about me? Is she falling asleep and should I make some coffee to wake her up? Should I be more considerate in this way or that way? And so he starts going through 100 different things that he can possibly do differently to alter the situation to make her more receptive. But he wants to be sympathetic to the no's. But in the meantime, she's feeling like, as he's thinking about those things, that she's not really being paid attention to very much, and that makes her feel less loved and wanted and desired for who she really is. And so there's a dynamic that occurs from that process, and your son is not sure what to do with that. And if he's too, if he just decides, okay, there's nothing about, she said no, and therefore I won't ask her for another date, I won't ask her for, because she's not interested, unless she comes back and she volunteers interest, I won't do a thing. Then the woman is with a man who's very sweet and very loving, and she's likely to say to him, I find you, Joe, extremely sweet, but let's be friends. And so, and the guys that sort of don't respond that way, but respond maybe for, they may withdraw for a few seconds and then try again, and then the woman sort of is a bit more stimulated and she moves into a receptive mode, and then there's no more no's or pullbacks, or there's a few pullbacks and that process repeats again, and Joe begins to see that the guys who women are ending up falling in love with are more likely to be the guys that take more risks. Now, then he looks at what women read. Well, do women read romance novels that say he stopped when I said no? No, they read they read romance novels like Sweet Savage Love. What is the theme of Sweet Savage Love? It's a woman is raped and a man is really sensitive and sweet and good looking and connects with her, but the woman ends up not being interested in the man who was the sweet and good looking guy, but ends up marrying the rapist, and that becomes a big selling romance novel among women. And more recently, we had 50 Shades of Grey, which was not exactly sweet, about men who were really gentle and receptive and caring to women. And so now, what should we do with all this? If women are reading romance novels with rape fantasies in essence about them, and still the most popular movie among women is the Rhett Butler taking Scarlett O'Hara up the stairs in Gone with the Wind, and this is the man taking a woman saying no up the stairs in Gone with the Wind, and these are not books read by men, they're books read by women. What this deserves is a dialogue. Men are hearing a mixed set of messages. They're seeing women with letting their breasts hang out. They're seeing that they can tap into free video porn, and 4 million options come up, and maybe it reduces to 1,000 in reality. But with that being stimulating men all the time, we have a whole set of issues that need discussion. Men have feelings about if you say no. Why is the university, which claims to be in favor of equality, why is that university not saying to the women, we want you to be equal not only in terms of blaming time, but also taking responsibility time? So, for example, when you do pull back and say no, communicate. If you want communication to be verbal, communicate to the man verbally. I will, when I am ready to take this any further than we've taken it now, I will be the one to come back and to continue this at the tongue-kissing level. And when I continue it at the tongue-kissing level, we can then go to the next level, and I'll give you a response to that. Then she takes the responsibility off of him of saying, more wine, more music, less wine, more about me, more about you, and where do I go with that? The current system of innocent women blame the man is an insult to women's intelligence. And we see this insult when we have rules on college campuses that a drunk woman who says yes to sex verbally, but in the morning she can claim she's raped because she was drunk in the evening and the man should have taken advantage of her. That same logic of her being incapacitated by being drunk, if we are talking about equality, should equally apply to the man being incapacitated with drunk, which would create the excuse for him raping her. Nobody wants a man who's drunk to be excused for raping a woman, but both sexes need to take responsibility for drinking, and then unless a man is manipulated, putting something into the drink that the woman didn't know about, both sexes need to take the responsibility for getting drunk. Otherwise, we're talking about somebody getting drunk and driving and killing somebody else and saying, oh, he was drunk, it didn't make any difference. We are treating women like children. We are infantilizing them. That's the opposite of everything that when I was on the board of National Organization for Women, everything that I wanted for women. I wanted women to be adults, to be credible, to be grown up, not to be blamers, and not to increase their permission to be victims.
Indeed, we are treating women like children. At the same time, we're putting men in huge jeopardy. I mean, for a man, it's a very dangerous thing to be involved sexually with a woman these days. It's very dangerous. And I'm curious, how did we get to this point today where it's so imbalanced, it's so twisted, where the men are just completely vulnerable?
I think part of that, Tom, was that the onus has always been on men. I mean, the responsibility and consequences for sex in many ways is a historical, part of our historical record that's really nothing new. It far predates feminism. We have always made men responsible. They're responsible to initiate contact women. They're responsible for the finances of taking care of them in a dating or romantic situation, and that extends, of course, into marriage. And still, the cultural mindset follows that line, and everybody has always assumed that men are responsible. And then again, you combine that drive, the sort of knee-jerk in the human species to put responsibility on men, then all of a sudden it is very easy to sell the idea that a woman is responsible if she has too much to drink and gets behind the wheel of a car.
Right.
But if she has too much to drink and goes to bed with somebody, then suddenly she's not responsible for her actions. She's not responsible for what she's doing. We can just blame the guy. I've said forever that blaming men for problems is feminists did not, or even the most extreme ideological feminists did not make that up.
Yes.
That's been a part of our culture. That's we had a recent discussion I did with Dean about how, say, what if the worst parts of ideological feminism fell? Dean pointed out, and I think rightly so, we will still have a litany of problems that Warren Farrell's been talking about for a long, long time. Feminism is certainly not the only problem, but in this case, the case of the idea of rape culture, this is a product of feminism. And the other thing I didn't mention, and because I have to force myself to even remember these things, we also have men that are victims of sexual assault by women. We have men that are sexually abused by women. We have school teachers across this country right now that are literally grooming adolescent students to have sex with them. You hear about it in the news all the time. And if there are components of something that begin, I don't subscribe to rape culture. I don't think that stuff is a cultural phenomenon. But if the way that rape culture is described, which is a system that normalizes, excuses, and looks the other way, what's happening to male victims of sexual assault fits that model a lot closer right now than what is happening to women. We have hysteria going for women, and it's not helping them. It's just like Warren said, it's infantilizing them. It's taking all responsibility for their choices, for their decisions off of them. And that is, and I wish that there would be more academicians start talking about this. This is how you cripple people. This is how you make them less than fully functioning human beings, is to constantly repeat the message, you're not responsible. No matter what you do, nothing is ever your fault. Whatever happens to you, you couldn't, but you don't have to worry about making better choices. If you dove into the North Sea during a storm, well, the water shouldn't have drowned you. And that's almost how irrational that this stuff is getting right now. And
that's
getting out of it's a problem.
Go ahead.
No,
that's one of the reasons why I think this article in Time magazine was so important. Because one of the things that was said was that the RAINN group, Rape and Incest National Network or something like that.
It's Rape and Incest National Network, yes.
Bless their hearts. One of the things they said was, don't blame all men. You know, why are we lumping all men as rapists? You know, we can't do that. It's a tiny subset of people who are doing bad things. You know, and that's a huge shift from what we've seen in the media for 40 years. I was happy to see that, let me tell you.
And the essence of masculinity is to protect women.
Yes.
And what we learn when we grow up is, you know, if we see a woman being raped, you know, I think you, Tom, and you, Paul, would risk your life to make sure that that woman is not raped, because that's part of what a man learns to do. If a woman is being beaten up, if she's being abused, she's being hurt, she's being raped, we are the very willingness, like we go to war to protect women and children and other men in our country. And so we have been trained to risk our lives to protect, among other people, women, but particularly women. And so that's what masculinity is about. And there are deviants from that modality that are rapists, but the feminists take rape as an extension of male privilege and power, and therefore they display the least amount of understanding of any other subset of the population about what men are about, what their intent is. And so that's dimension one. Dimension two is if we want to work on minimizing rape, and there's no one that I know who doesn't want to work on that, then we also have to start at the very basic message. We're still retaining the old historic message to women and our daughters of attract, resist, and to our sons of pursue, persist. And that attract, resist, pursue, persist message, so beautifully played out in the tango as a dance, of the woman just sort of going, no, 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 and the man coming after, and the woman, we know in that dance that the woman is part of the process. And the dance acknowledges that and makes the beauty of male-female relations a part of that process. But if we want to, but it also is a process that makes it unclear when the woman is saying no. Is that woman who's backing off in the dance and playing coy, she's attracting him and she's resisting him, but that's dependent upon her fantasy that he will pursue her and persist her. Now, what's the purpose of that fantasy? The purpose of that fantasy historically was that a woman wanted to be sure that when she did have sex with a man, that he would be the type of man who was really committed to her. And so if she said no, and he cared enough to come back and try again, she knew two things. She knew that he cared enough to come back and try again, but she also knew she was possibly going to be being pursued by a man who just didn't take no for an answer from anybody. Imagine a woman who wants to marry a person who's selling a product, and the moment she said no, he backs off and never tries again. Well, she knows that she's now involved with a man who, the moment he gets a no when his product is being, when he's asking to sell his product to another company, he'll back off and never try again. Well, she knows instinctively the man who backs off and never tries again is not committed, is not capable of knowing how to get around no's and discovering better ways of convincing a different answer to the person that's being pursued. And so, and then historically speaking also, when a man did have sex with a woman for the first time, he made a vow and a commitment. When he had sex with her for the first time, he was making himself obligated to financially support her for the rest of her life. And so women have historically known on some level that the value of their sex was to be supported for the rest of their life. And once birth control occurred, that broke down, and we're sort of sorting things out from there. There's still a part of women, when a woman is sexual with a man, we talk about a sexual favor, or we know that men pay much more for women as prostitutes than women pay for men as prostitutes. And so we have all this residue of women's sexuality being worth more. A recent survey that was done of 12,000 women by Levine Public Relations Agency, women all around the country answered the question, if you were to be paid, if you were a virgin and you were to give away your virginity, how much would you need to be paid? The women's answer was 10,000 times greater than what a man felt he needed to be paid to lose his virginity. In fact, some men said that they'd pay to have their virginity taken from them. So the important larger picture that I'm getting at here is that what we have evolved with the discussion of male-female tensions and relationships is the groundwork, and with the changes that are needed and have occurred with technology and birth control and a new society that doesn't have to worry so much on a woman having sex means a lifetime of support, that requires people being able to handle each other, communicate with each other. That's what the universities should be setting up. Good dialogues, that's what high schools should be setting up. And teaching people how to communicate in general should be being set up in grammar school. That's the work that we need to do to end the male-female misunderstanding culture that is a culture that is part of us.
Yeah, I'd love to see some good courses in high school and college on relationships. You know, how do you deal with a relationship? What do you do? What's it like to get rejected? What goes on? Because, you know, the guys deal with this all the time, and they hurt.
Absolutely. I mean, simple things like men being in the center of a circle who are just beginning to date, and what their fears are, what their feelings are, and women sitting around listening to them, and then the women sitting in the center and then talking about their feelings and fears, and you know, and and men sitting around listening to them. Those things start opening people up about all the people see, wow, you know, I didn't realize that that was your intent, and that's what I didn't even have a clue as to what guys feel, or didn't have a clue to what women feel, and I didn't realize you were having sex with me because you didn't want to, you wanted to continue having me be with you, and you were afraid that I would drop you in favor of some girl that would have sex with you. That must feel really insulting and hurtful, and you know, and that's you know, and then but the guy then you bring out the best in the heart in the guy, and the same with the women.
And why is it that this sort of thing, Warren and Paul, hasn't gotten into the media? I mean, the only thing we've seen from the media, except for mainstream media, has been for years just the woman's side of things. You know, why is that?
I think we're seeing evidence. If you look at what's happening at the Wall Street Journal and the National Post lately, yes, we are starting to see the beginnings of a different narrative that is long overdue and beginning to emerge. One of the things that I wanted to talk about a little bit, to touch on what Warren was just saying, there's another consequence to all this that is just, I mean, when you think about all the ramifications of what this whole culture of demonizing men and deifying women is doing, and the trust that it's costing, and the risk that it is creating, that dance that Warren was talking about is something that more and more men are seeing as dangerous for them to participate in. They are starting to wake up to the fact that that's not just a dance anymore. Part of it's a minefield. Part of it is if I step in the wrong place at the wrong time, it's going to cost me, and it's going to cost me severely. So what we have, if you read Dr. Helen Smith's new book, Men on Strike, you see the research is showing that women are becoming more interested in marriage and men are becoming less interested in marriage. There is a reason for that, and it's not just in the United States. This is happening across the Western world. There is a movement now, a MGTOW, of men going their own way, that's growing, that are looking at this and saying, you know what, I don't want to dance, not at this price. What's in it for me? What am I going to do? Because we have this this range of options that that I still maintain, despite some of my critics, that feminism was correct to create for women a series of options in their lives rather than being confined to one thing to do. Men now have, the way I see it, they have really, it looks like one, but it's sort of two options. They can go the classic traditional route, marriage and family, maybe military, maybe whatever they dedicate their work life to taking care of others. They can also go on a path of more of less traditional thinking and more feminist type in their thinking. They can adopt those ideas and live as social justice warriors, or just live with that mindset. But the idea for men to make a choice, to say, here's the path that I'm choosing to walk, is something that is still shunned a great deal. The men that have decided to go their own way get a lot of flack for it. But the thing is, how can we reasonably reach out to men and tell them they're crazy for feeling that way? They're not crazy. They have very, very good reasons.
You bet.
Really good reasons that interest in marriage is starting to wane for men. There is very good reasons why men are looking at that dance and saying, you know what, I don't want to end up like Caleb Warner. I don't want to end up like this other guy I knew that went on one date, and next thing you know, everybody in the school's talking about him like he's a deviant. He may be expelled. These things are very real. They're very happening. And these are also young men that are growing up. As I've said before, they see their father now living in a one-bedroom apartment, driving a used car after 30 years of work and taking care of a family, or 10 years or whatever. And they're looking at all of this and they're saying, there's nothing here for me. There's nothing here. I can try. I can try to fit that mold. I can be very selective. I can try to find a woman that's modern-minded and sees me as a human being that has options. And in this generation of women that are being raised to believe that all these men are potential rapists, that all these men are part of a power structure that has oppressed women since the beginning of time. And by the way, it's not just rape, it's domestic violence. It's a whole range of other issues that gender ideologues allege are an extension of patriarchal power into the home, into work life, into everywhere else. And men are really starting to look at, where do I fit in this? Because I'm a bad guy once just for having male genitalia in one way. And they are getting so demonized. In the average college right now, there's posters up, men can stop rape, wear a white ribbon. And I'm sure, and I haven't seen this happen, but I will lay dollars to donuts. There have been guys out there who were sporting black eyes from their girlfriend that were asked to wear white ribbons, symbolize their opposition to violence against women.
Yep.
It's crazy for young men right now. It's absolutely insane, and I think we have to pay attention to that, but I'm going to quit rambling in a moment. The other two things about RAINN, which, by the way, for everybody's knowledge, is the largest anti-sexual assault organization in the United States, probably the world. They've not only come out and said explicitly that there is no rape culture. It's a fantasy. It doesn't exist. There's no evidence to support it. They have also questioned the administration's policies on how sexual assault allegations are being handled in colleges. And they are suggesting law enforcement, if you can imagine that law enforcement actually be involved when there's a sexual assault allegation, not a star chamber or a tribunal in a college that will look at some of the evidence, and with basically a bunch of young, untrained people making decisions that affect the rest of people's lives.
Yes.
And they have attacked all of this. So I hope, regardless of how you feel about RAINN, and we know that there is a lot of feminists in that organization, that people write them and really give them a thank you and encouragement for continuing what they're doing, because if maybe this administration won't listen, but maybe the next one will, maybe we can start getting this across. I think it can change, but this is where it starts. And I'm hoping, as I discussed with Tom before, that there's a domino effect now. Rape culture has just been challenged in the way no other feminist canard has been challenged. And I don't mean, I know how well Warren Farrell did deconstructing the wage gap myth, but we didn't have major influential organizations out there taking Warren's work and taking it to the White House and saying, we've got to correct this. Mm-hmm. I'm hoping there's a domino effect, because all the research that's been done for all these issues that need to be addressed is out there, and we have the opportunity to have that start happening. And it starts with efforts like RAINN is doing right now.
Yeah, I agree, Paul. The moment I read that article, the first thing I did was found their website and sent them an email and told them how much I appreciated what they did, because it's the first group I've seen that really has stood up and said, no, this is not right. You know, rape culture doesn't exist, and that took some courage on their part, and my hat is off to them, and I deeply appreciate it. And I hope there's a domino effect. You know, there's so many myths out there about men that have been perpetuated by the media and by academia and by the feminists for the last 40 years, that it'd be great to have one sort of start to get chopped away at, because we've got what the domestic violence myth about men not being victims of domestic violence. We've got Warren's the wage gap thing. We've got the whole idea about this is the sexism in schooling and sexism in healthcare and sexism in where it's bad fathers. I mean, there's all kinds of myths that are sitting out there just bubbling that have no backing whatsoever as far as research or as far as the numbers go. And so, yeah, I'd love to see things start cracking. And I think they can. I hope so. And I think that's why we all need to speak up. We all need to speak up and say something. You know?
I think one of the larger picture issues here, looking at the politics of this, is that when I was on the board of NOW in New York City, I remember sort of talking with other feminists, and it was the beginning of the divorce period in the late 60s, early 70s, and the first thing that happened was the feminists were saying, you know, there should be more father in families and less mother in the families, and more women in the workplace and more men in the home. And yet, as soon as the divorces started occurring, the feminist movement, we got bad feedback from that, from women who said, I want options open to me. If I want the children after divorce, I should be able to have the children after divorce. And the feminist movement backed off and chickened out, basically, and said, oh, we're gonna lose some of our membership if we close off options to our members. And so what the feminist movement began to understand was, as long as it opened options for women and never made women wrong, or never closed options for women, then it could expand its political base. For each option that it opened, for each time it made women a victim, each time it gave a woman an opportunity to get something without taking responsibility for it. There was no opposition from women on that expanded the political base of the women's movement, and eventually we almost unconsciously evolved to looking at anything that might say, no, after a divorce, if we want women and men to have equal opportunities for jobs, we should want women and men to have equal options to be involved with the children. That would take some options away from women. No, we can't do that. And so a tremendous number of institutional apparatuses got set up. So in the one of those is the Violence Against Women Act, which basically allows a lot of the work that I do is I go around and help fathers get to be involved full-time equally with their children after divorce. And what I encounter is a lawyer will say to a woman, no, if you just say that you have a fear of your husband, then we can get you violence against women money to be able to support our legal fees, and we can begin to file continuances so that the children that you've taken to this new home, like maybe to your parents' home in a different state, so we can keep those children longer and longer in your parents' home, in your parents' home, and in your ex-wife's parents' home in a different state, and those children can get settled into a school system and have new friends, and the judge, if we continue this long enough, will be afraid after a while to unsettle your children again, even though you shouldn't have taken them to this location. So the women have this enormous billions of dollars from the Violence Against Women Act as a resource to be able to call upon, that it gives them an incentive to say they're afraid of their ex-husband or their future ex-husband, the dad of their children, in order to be able to have the children be with them or be with their some new man that they've met, or be with them and their grandparents. And so these are the type, and in colleges you have the same type of dynamic working. You've institutionalized women as victim and men as being responsible and being evil. So if you have a man that's accused of a date rape of a woman, and that goes up to a hearing where the man is presumably being heard and the woman is presumably being heard, the college is afraid to say this man shouldn't have, he was drunk and she was drunk, and she said no to sex the following morning. Well, they're afraid to do anything about that lest the press pick that up and say that they are fostering rape, and that they get bad PR, and that that costs them in essence millions of dollars of future students applying to to their college and paying tuition. And so we have created a series of institutions that are caught up in the outgrowth of feminist ideology that has said women are always should have options and men should always take responsibility, and the institutions should always make a start from the assumption that men are wrong and that women are the victims of men. And that is so deep inside of our culture. It's like fluoride in our water. You can't take it out.
The deck is stacked, and it's stacked in favor of women and against men. And a part of me thinks that the way it's gotten that way is that we haven't been able to say no. You know, Congress has not been able to say no. The media has not been able to say no. The schools, the administrations of the colleges can't say no. I mean, it's crazy. We talk about our culture has become feminized. Yes, in some ways that's great. Compassion and this and that. We've really lost the capacity to say no. You can't do that.
Yes. Because we are biologically programmed to respond to protect women, and whenever women ask something for us, we say we compete with each other to give them what they want, and that's part of our programming. And part of women's programming is when I drop a handkerchief, I'll discover, or I have a flat, or I can't solve a math problem, I'll discover which men are willing to compete with each other to solve the problem. And so feminists are really doing the most traditional thing that traditional women have done for centuries, which is competing to be the biggest victim and creating a new phenomenon called victim power that is getting that is continuing to get men to do the protection. But in the long run, we're infantilizing women. And we are making our sons fearful that if they're in high school and they ask a woman out and they get into the normal male-female back and forth, and that they could be right on the edge of an accusation of date rape, which might even be an accusation that's honest from the woman's perspective. And if they get into a trial, they're finished. And if they get into into a marriage, that they could lose the children, they could lose the home, they could, and if there's an altercation in the marriage and they are hit by their wife and they call the police may just as well come out and arrest them rather than the wife. And they begin to see all these things. These are not good images for a boy to grow up and see that his father is taken out of the home, taken into prison, and then there's a divorce and the mother gets the home and the father doesn't, and he barely ever sees the father again. He's looking to when he will grow up and be a dad. It doesn't look like a pretty picture for him. And we all have an investment in it being a good, positive, equal, caring, loving picture for both our sons and our daughters, because most of us are parents of both types of both male and female children. And
leaders need to be responsible for everyone, not just for certain.
And we need to hold them responsible.
That's where we've fallen down.
Yes, our leaders will never say, will never have the courage unless we create the pressure, because politicians are only a few steps ahead of where people can be. Yeah.
I think part of the other difficulty with this that you were talking about, Tom, is that if you look at who actually has control of the liquidable income, the discretionary income across the culture, you see why the media caters so much to a message that many women want to hear, why we see so much male bashing and the elevating of women above men, because they do have the power of the purse string. And if advertisers upset the people that are spending money with their companies, they're not going to last very long. That's a tough thing to overcome. So, and this is where, if I can blow a voice for men's horn just a little bit here, one of the things that we do that I'm the proudest of is that we remind men constantly that these are choices. Because while politicians may not say no because of votes, and advertisers may not say no because of purse strings, and movie makers and media and everybody else out there that sort of plays off this modern zeitgeist for $1, and there's plenty of it going on. Men still have the onus and responsibility to make wise choices for their lives. They can. They don't have to become, and I'm not going to turn this political, men have a choice, they really do, about whether or not they're willing to go kill and die for a corporate interest, for somebody's political agenda in the Middle East. They have a choice whether or not they do that. It may not be an easy choice for some, especially for men that are less educated, but it is a choice.
Yes.
You have a choice if you are dating somebody who throws tantrums every time you even hint at the word no. You have a choice about whether or not you marry that person. You have a choice, because if she acts that way when you're dating her, imagine how she'll act in a divorce court. You'll get a very clear picture of that. Men with the right information, and there are more men getting better information now. Finally, it's happening. Men are getting information that they can make wiser decisions on. You can protect yourself in many ways still. You're not just a target walking around waiting for the bullet to hit. And if you view yourself that way, you're doing yourself a disservice. The only thing that I worry about in the middle of this transition that men are going through, and they badly needed one to get out of this kind of trap that they've been placed in by modern sexual politics, is that the idea, at least of a voice for men, ultimately is to build bridges between men and women, not to burn them. We do recognize that there has to be a new bridge. That the old one, the one we've been operating off of, doesn't work very well. It doesn't support the weight of a man. He's going to fall through. We need a bridge that will support the weight of a man, that will allow for both persons' integrity and autonomy, their independence and their dignity. And we don't have a culture yet that's ready for that. And the only way we're going to get that culture is to start producing men that demand it. And if we can do that, we can make some progress.
Indeed. And I think that, one thing I'd like to add to that, Paul, is that the MGTOW movement are men saying no.
Yes, they are.
They're saying no. They're doing what I think needs to be done. They're saying no, not for me.
And we can't, certainly I would be the last person to say a guy was making a wrong choice.
I'm applauding.
We're going to do our next show on the concept of failure to launch. And I put that in scare quotes for a reason, and we'll be getting into some of this, and hopefully that'll add some more depth even to this discussion about where men are and where they're going.
I think if you're a man listening to this and you're a young man, I think it's really, and you want to pick up on the theme of, okay, I'm strong enough to say no, so what do I do with that strength? I think that one of the most powerful things you can do if you're on a college campus is to petition your campus, get 5 or 6 or 10 guys and women who want to have a men's studies department to be part of your college's structure, and to be financed by the same types of funds that women's departments are financed by. And if your school says no, we don't want to finance that, or don't do it, or they seem to be putting you on passive-aggressive hold for too long, you go ahead and you file a lawsuit against the university, because the university is now taking public funds, federal funds and state funds, and even if it's a private university, it gets lots of federal funds, and they are misusing those funds against Title IX and against the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution, and that is, and you can get so go out, organize some people who agree with you, sue the university, and the university will be much more interested in responding by saving itself from a lawsuit than it will from just a sweet petition to have a men's studies department, which will never happen because many people have tried that and it hasn't happened. But I have been advised by presidents of universities that that you can make a hero out of the president by filing a lawsuit, and the president would then be saving the university from a lawsuit. Whereas if the president responds positively to a men's studies course being started without a lawsuit, the president is vulnerable to being accused of being anti-female, and he becomes Larry Summers, like the Larry Summers who said something that there should be, we should look into all dimensions of engineering as to whether women and men are equally suited for that. And he, as president of Harvard, was eliminated as president within months after that statement. And so so if you don't want to just be complaining and you want to do something with the enormous energy so many extremely bright male and female college students have, this is something constructive that you could do that within 2 or 3 months of your filing a lawsuit could begin to change the entire gender dialogue on these issues and bring everything that we're seeing happen so unfairly to boys and men on the college campus into question in a very short period of time.
And Warren or Paul, who could they contact to get help with that? Because I'm sure these guys are thinking, I don't know how to file a lawsuit.
Well, one thing that you can do is to come to the men's conference in Detroit, where you'll meet, that is being sponsored by A Voice for Men on June 26th, 27th, and 28th, and meet other men who are like-minded. Find out from us how to go about doing that organizing. One of the things I'll be talking about there is how to make a living doing men's issues and still retain wisdom and still retain the ability to love. Because oftentimes when we become activists, we start hardening in a different way that makes us ourselves become like the people we're complaining about, and so we don't want that to happen to ourselves. But you need to meet people in the flesh who are supportive of the types of things that we care about, so you don't feel so isolated and so lonely. Too often men isolate themselves, and isolation is the beginning of depression. And so something like the Detroit Men's Conference that you can find by going to A Voice for Men is a really good way of working one's way out of that. I believe that if you want an introduction to these issues, I hope the Myth of Male Power can create a little bit of an introduction to these issues. Read and then join and become involved and have courage, organize, and develop a support system. Technology is allowing that support system to happen now. Maybe we can even do something. You're going to be much better at the answer to this, Tom, than I would be, like doing hashtag MANstream media and even creating a whole concept of the whole concept of MANstream media was creating an alternative to the mainstream media, and maybe we can begin to develop some type of support group around people who want that type of alternative.
Why not?
Let me add, too, that Sage Girard, a Voice for Men director of collegiate activism, who single-handedly, and he has people helping him now, but he started from scratch by himself, and he has successfully established a men's issues group at Kennesaw State University. He will be at the conference joining us. And so for any young men in college out there that would like to attend this conference and meet Sage, he will be there. And I know he would love to talk to you about his experiences, the ups and downs of getting something like that done. But he's a guy that did it successfully, and he did it more or less on his own to start with. So he's a real good example to talk to.
That's a great idea, Paul, and maybe even have an informal time when people could get together and talk about those issues, you know.
Well, my wife is involved with public relations, and one of the things that she says to me is that we shouldn't make these Google Hangouts too long because I'm sure to take his fan. And so I think we should probably call it to a close because the three of us are very articulate, at least the two of you are, and I'm verbal, and so we could go on about this forever.
You're probably right, Warren. You're probably right. Paul, you got any last words?
Yeah, I did just want to reiterate, come to the conference in 2 days. The ticket prices are going up, as they typically do, the closer we approach an event. The tickets are selling well. We still have plenty of them, though, so come on and join us in Detroit. Also, if you're interested in understanding more about what the men's movement about, you can see behind Warren on his screen that there is a book, The Myth of Male Power, which is now available on ebook at warrenfarrell.com, and you can also get it through voiceformen.com. Pretty much the same way. It just leads to his site. But if you really want to start understanding these issues, the research, the thinking that went into so much of what we talk about on these shows, get that book and read it, because it's just as applicable today, every bit as it was when it was first written. So I would suggest doing that.
And Paul, they can get that for free if they sign up for the.
That's right.
Why don't you?
First 100 people, which we're getting close to, get a free copy of the book.
Yes. Maybe that's a good place to end.
Great.
Anything else, Warren?
No. It's just been wonderful talking with the two of you again. I'm always energized by our conversations.
Indeed. And thank you all for joining us tonight. It's been good to have you with us for this special edition. And we'll look forward to seeing you on, it's April 17th, right? When we're talking about failure to launch. So we'll look forward to seeing you then. Good night.